Hello, and welcome to Great Stories USA. Today I'm going to tell you about a transgender political philosophy major who thought that he was smarter than our vice president. A while ago, JD Vance decided to make a trip to UCLA to give a speech while discussing his book, Hillbilly Elegy. He wanted to share his knowledge and let the students of this notoriously liberal school know that life for those in what they called flyover states wasn't as easy as the Kardashians made living in this great country look. As JD walked in, the campus auditorium buzzed with anticipation. Students, professors, and local journalists had gathered for a debate between JD Vance, the best-selling author and senator, and Oliver Marsh, a senior majoring in political philosophy. Oliver had a reputation on campus, an outspoken advocate for progressive ideals, eager to take on conservative thinkers. Vance leaned back in his chair, a half-smile forming as Oliver launched into his opening remarks. "Senator Vance," Oliver began, "you talk about the struggles of working-class Americans, but your solutions, tax cuts, deregulation, are just neoliberal band-aids on a broken system. Isn't it time we move beyond nostalgia for a Rust Belt that doesn't exist anymore and invest in real social programs?" Vance chuckled. "That's a fair question, Oliver. But let me ask you something. Have you ever actually lived in the places you're talking about?" Oliver hesitated. "Well, no, but I've studied economic data and—" "Data," Vance interjected. "Look, I respect academics, but numbers don't tell you what it's like to watch your uncle lose his job at the factory, take a pill to numb the pain, and never quite recover. They don't show you the look on a mother's face when she's juggling 3 part-time jobs to keep food on the table," the audience murmured. Oliver stiffened. "That's exactly why we need universal health care, higher minimum wages, and—" "Oliver," Vance said, leaning forward, "if throwing government money at problems fixed them, West Virginia would be the most prosperous place in America. It's gotten billions in aid, yet people are still struggling. Why? Because policies cooked up in university classrooms don't address the reality of what's happening on the ground." Oliver opened his mouth, but Vance wasn't done. "You think blue-collar workers are clinging to the past out of ignorance? They aren't. They just know that if Washington decides their industries are obsolete, no amount of academic theorizing will pay their mortgage or keep their kids in school." Oliver's face flushed. He was out of his depth, and he knew it. Then Vance's tone softened. "Look, I don't say this to tear you down. You're smart, and you care. But if you really want to help, come spend a year in Middletown, Ohio, or Wheeling, West Virginia. Talk to the folks you think you're advocating for. Learn from them, not just about them. Because change doesn't happen through slogans. It happens when you roll up your sleeves and actually do the work." Oliver swallowed hard. For the first time in his college career, he had nothing to say. The debate ended, but the lesson lingered. Now here is another story about JD's time in Congress. This story shows that even in the face of adversity, JD has always stood up for what he believed in defending the American people from liberal dogma and corruption. The House chamber was tense. The government shutdown had stretched into its second week, and tempers were flaring on both sides. News cameras were rolling as a special Senate hearing convened to discuss possible solutions. JD Vance, the freshman senator from Ohio, leaned back in his chair, watching as a prominent liberal congressman launched into a tirade. "This shutdown is a direct result of Republican obstructionism," the congressman thundered, slamming his fist on the table. "You and your party have held this government hostage with extremist demands, refusing to compromise, and now working-class Americans are suffering. Federal employees are missing paychecks. Veterans are losing benefits. All because you refuse to govern." Vance exhaled slowly, then leaned forward. "Congressman, that's a passionate speech. But let's set the theatrics aside for a second and talk facts. Because if we're going to debate who's responsible for this shutdown, let's at least be honest with the American people." The congressman folded his arms. "Go ahead, enlighten me." Vance adjusted his microphone. "You talk about obstruction, but who exactly is refusing to negotiate? The House passed a funding bill with border security provisions that the American people overwhelmingly support. Your side won't even consider it. Instead, you'd rather keep the government shut down than make any real concessions." That's absurd, the congressman scoffed. We're willing to negotiate, but we won't cave to extremist demands that hurt immigrants and vulnerable communities. Vance nodded. See, that's the problem. You frame every disagreement as a moral crisis. You don't want a negotiation. You want total victory. And in the meantime, federal workers, many of them in my home state of Ohio, are wondering how they're going to pay their rent. That's exactly why we need to reopen the government immediately, the congressman shot back. You can't use American workers as bargaining chips. Vance smirked. That's rich coming from the party that used the debt ceiling as a weapon just last year. Spare me the sudden concern for government employees. This is about power, plain and simple. The congressman's face darkened. So what? You think the solution is just to give in to every demand from the far right? Vance shook his head. No, I think the solution is to govern like adults. When I go back home to Ohio, people aren't asking me to score points in Washington. They're asking me why their communities have been left behind for decades, by both parties. And frankly, the people responsible are the ones who see government as a game of moral posturing instead of actually getting things done. The congressman rolled his eyes. That's easy rhetoric. But the truth is, government shutdowns hurt real people, and you're fine with keeping it closed over an ideological crusade. Vance's expression darkened. No, Congressman, I want it open. But I want it open in a way that actually addresses the problems facing America. If we just cave every time one side refuses to compromise, we're teaching Washington that dysfunction gets rewarded. A murmur rippled through the chamber. The congressman opened his mouth but found himself struggling for a strong rebuttal. Vance leaned back again. Look, I get that you see government as the ultimate problem solver. I don't. But if you really care about getting things done, maybe, just maybe, you should stop treating political opposition as an existential evil, because that's how we got here in the first place. Silence. The camera zoomed in on the congressman's face, but he had nothing left to say. Vance had made his point, and the room knew it. The shutdown battle wasn't over, but at least for today, the senator from Ohio had won the argument.